Once I cut these wires, I'm committed and there's no turning back. This video is all about the folding hard top or the Vario roof on the Mercedes R230 SL. Some of the things in this video may also be applicable to the SLK, which has a very similar roof system. In this video, I'm going to be showing you some of the common things that go wrong with this roof and what you can do to avoid that. I'm also going to be showing you some preventative steps that you can take to avoid your roof going wrong and give you a better insight into why these roofs go wrong and how you can fix them. Now, it's worth pointing out that when this R230 came out, the folding hardtop was one of the major features and attractive features of this car, and it solved a number of problems. Firstly, the folding hardtop allowed this particular car, the SL55 AMG, to go up to speeds of 200 miles an hour with a slightly modified engine, which you'd never be able to do with a soft top on this car. And secondly, and perhaps most importantly, if you've owned an SL, you will have to store your hardtop somewhere. And in this garage here, I have 4 SL hardtops stored, the Pagoda, and then 3 R107 hardtops, and they do take up a lot of space. And the last thing that's worth mentioning, if you've ever owned an SL or any cabriolet or soft top car, you will notice after 10 or 20 years that that soft top will need replacing. Either the glass will start delaminating from the soft top, or you'll start to get green algae growing on there, or the window will be slashed, or some other problem like that. And the folding hardtop sorted all of those issues out. So before you give it a hard time, just remember what it actually solved in the first place. So if you own one of these cars, or if you're thinking of buying one of these cars, one of the first things I would do is go to the boot or the trunk of the car and actually check the level of the hydraulic fluid in the pump. This is the hydraulic pump here. It lives under this piece of foam, and the very first thing to check if you've either got a car or you're thinking of buying one is that this foam is completely dry and there's no signs of any water ingress in this car, because these cars did have a propensity to leak through the rear seal and water would run down here. And you will find that if any of these connections here are corroded, either the relay connections or the main wire terminal connections, you'll have no end of problems. So just take a moment to take the plugs off, look at them, make sure the connections are nice and shiny and not green. The second thing to check is that the level of the fluid is at the correct level. Now, if you look carefully, there are 2 little triangular marks on this hydraulic fluid tank here, and the level of the fluid should be between those 2 marks. If your fluid is below that lower triangle, ours is a little bit low, what you should do is take out one of these little fittings here and top your tank up. As a small aside, if you ever need to do work on your folding roof and you need to release the pressure in the hydraulic system, there's a little fitting here, an Allen key fitting here, that you need to undo, and that will release the pressure in the hydraulic lines. So ensuring that you have the correct quantity of hydraulic fluid in your tank will put less strain and stress on your hydraulic cylinders. And if for some reason you haven't got the correct fluid in your hydraulic tank, that may indicate a hydraulic fluid leak. And those leaks are not always easy to spot or even be aware of. The leaks could be somewhere deep behind these trim pieces here, so you may not necessarily see hydraulic fluid dripping from the bottom of the car. The way to check it is via the level in the tank, and if you've topped that up and you find that that level drops again after using the roof, then you've got a leak. While we are here in the boot or the trunk of this car, I want to highlight a potential problem that you may encounter with your roof not closing, namely these flaps here. Now, this roof mechanism here is a complicated roof mechanism that opens up in the normal way when you're trying to get into the trunk, but hinges back when the roof is folding away. And you should get into the habit when you're closing your roof of actually closing it in the center like this, as opposed to closing it with one end, with one hand or one end, because what you'll do over time is you'll start to bend these struts and put them out of alignment, and that is one of the things that then starts to put undue strain on the rest of the system. Now, these flaps here should be tight to the boot lid like that, and sometimes you'll find that they're loose or they hang down. Now, one of the reasons that these flaps here become loose and hang down is because people get into the habit of slamming their boot closed rather than letting the soft close mechanism do the work. And if you are one of those people that slam your boot shut each time, either because you're not aware that you're supposed to close it gently or because your soft close mechanism no longer works, every time you slam that boot down, you're jarring this whole system here, and that is one of the things that leads to these little ratchets here failing. The folding hardtop roof on these SLs is operated by a series of hydraulic cylinders. There's 8 of them that operate the roof, and I believe there's an additional 3 that operate the roll bar, and then a whole series of micro switches. And your roof can fail because either the hydraulic cylinders are leaking, which you can check that by checking the fluid, the level of the hydraulic fluid, or your roof may fail because one of the micro switches is failing, or indeed some of the wiring between the micro switches and the controller has failed. Now, if you want to save yourself some money, not just with these cars, but really with any car, you need to listen to the car when it's telling you that something's wrong. So, for example, if you've got an oil leak under the car, or you've got transmission problems, or your roof is having problems, or your consumer battery is constantly running down, you need to get to the bottom of that problem before it becomes a major issue and leaves you stranded somewhere. If one of your cylinders is leaking and you continue to operate the roof, you're putting undue strain and stress on the other cylinders in the car, so you need to get that leak sorted as soon as possible, otherwise you'll be repairing all of the cylinders before you know it. In another video at a later stage, I will be showing you the options you've got if your hydraulic cylinders are leaking. You can basically take the cylinder out and the complete line that goes all the way back to the pump and send that off for repair, or you can take the cylinder out and cut the line and then join the line with special fittings, or you can also potentially repair the cylinder yourself with an O-ring, and that's something we'll be doing, as I say, in a later video as and when we need to with this car. The reason that I'm doing a video on the roof now is that our roof has potentially developed an intermittent problem whereby it goes halfway down and then gets stuck, which what happened to us the other day. Now, after fiddling about with the switch for a while, we did eventually get the roof to go down and then back up, but that is the time to start diagnosing the problem. It just so happened that some Chinese company sent us one of their scanners to test, which I had in the car at the time, this launch Creda Elite version 2, and normally when people ask us to test products, I say no, because unless it's a product that I actually use myself, I wouldn't be recommending it to subscribers. But it is the case that we have 2 other scanners for this car, the iCarsoft 2 and also an Autel scanner, and neither of them have been able to fix the problem of calibrating the suspension. So in a later video, I'm going to do a more thorough video on which scanner to use for your Mercedes, and we're going to be seeing if this scanner here actually allows you to calibrate the suspension and lower the suspension. What I can tell you about this launch scanner is that it was able to tell us that the problem with our roof had something to do with the roller switches in the top of the roof. So for the remainder of this video, what I'm going to be doing is taking the headliner of the roof off and investigating the problem, looking at the micro switches and the wiring there, just to make sure that everything's as it should be, and seeing if we can fix this roof and find out why it stopped working. This hardtop roof here has a number of pinch points, and if you put it in the halfway position with the engine running, I think it will stay in that position for about 7 minutes before it gently starts folding down either into the trunk or back to its position. So please, if you are working on this roof, make sure it's propped up in some way, and whatever you do, do not have your hands or your arms anywhere where they can potentially get chopped off. So I'm going to start the engine of our car, and then I'm going to attempt to put the roof down to see if it gets stuck in the halfway position as it did previously. And if it does, what I'm going to do is attempt to take off this headliner here very carefully, because there are some extremely little thin bits of plastic just here, which you've got to take out from underneath the seal without cracking. We're going to be checking that all the screws for the locking mechanism are still tight and that the micro switches still operate. So you can see that with the engine still running, our roof has stopped in that position, and we've got a visit workshop light on the dash. What you need to be really careful not to do is to be putting your hands in any of these parts here, because this roof will eventually sink down. So we're going to stop the roof in this position here so we can access these screws here, which you need to take out, and then we're going to need to unclip some clips at the back of the roof. We managed to get that headliner off without breaking it. Now, we kept the engine running during that process and the roof didn't move in that time, so we undid the 5 screws first, and then we went to the back of the car and unclipped these 5 clips. And then there's some additional clips here and here that you need to undo as well. If we come into the car, we can see the position of those side clips. There's one there and there's one there. And then on this side of the car, we've got one of them, where is it, back there, but the other one actually came out with the headliner. So once you have unscrewed those 5 screws, unclip the back, you can see that one of those clips there is actually broken. You've got 4 clips to do on the side here. They will pull straight down, and then this should just pull forward towards the front of the car. Now that we've got the headliner off, we can get a better idea of how this roof operates. Now, this here is one of the hydraulic cylinders that could potentially leak, and when that leaks, the hydraulic fluid will often run down the side here, and you'll start to see this rubber trim. Where is it? This rubber trim starting to go all wavy. So it's an idea to check that you haven't got any leaks here, because it'll start off with a very small leak. When you put your finger there, it'll be wet, and that is the time to replace that cylinder or repair it, rather than waiting for hydraulic to start dripping on your lap. What happens when you operate the roof is that this cylinder pushes this rod out and this here spins. Now, this here is the manual operation for the roof. You can put an Allen key in there and turn that manually, and that unlocks these 2 locks here. And you can see there are 2 micro switches, one here, sorry, one on the other side here. Now, when we scanned the car with that launch scanner and got that error code, what the error code is telling us is that one of these switches is not sending a signal to the control unit. And you can see that when this is closed, that this switch is not depressed, or is depressed, sorry, and when this is open, as we'll see in a minute, this switch is not depressed. So in the first instance, I'm actually going to put the roof halfway up so you can see how this whole system here is operating. If you can just about hear that clicking sound, and generally, if those switches are clicking like that, it means they're working, but it doesn't mean there's not a break in one of these electrical wires. A common pinch point of the blue and brown wires for those micro switches is the hinge here where the roof hinges, and in order to get to that wiring and have a look at it, we're going to need to take some of these trim panels off. Once you turn the engine off, you've got about 7 seconds before the roof will lower itself under its own weight. So we've just wedged this piece of wood here that hopefully will stop us getting our arm chopped off as we attempt to get this piece of trim here out. We cut that wooden support to 158 centimeters. Now, this piece of trim is held in here with a series of clips, and it's also under this piece of rubber here. There's 2 clips on this side, and there's a number on the side and the back. At the back, this trim piece is just held on with these 2 clips there, and at the front, just these 2 metal clips. So you're going to be prying off here and here, and then at the back as well. Once you've got that rear trim panel off, you can trace this wire down here, and you can see some of the potential pinch points where the wire is bent back and forwards as the roof goes up and down. This one here particularly. Now, you might have to take that sheathing off to actually inspect the wires. Now, for those of you who are interested, the S69 switch wires go down here, bend around here, go under there, and then snake back into the boot and go off to the rear SAM unit. This is the wire here. You can tell because the sheathing is slightly matte compared to the other wires. That goes off round to the back of the car and then into the SAM unit, which is contained under the fuse box on that side. What happens as this roof drops down is when it gets to the end of stage 3, the hydraulic cylinder here releases pressure, and that closes that and activates these micro switches. And if at that stage, when these wires are bent to the maximum, there's a short circuit or the wires are barely touching, at that point the control module won't sense that the switches are shut and your roof will pause. And I think that's what our problem is. Once I cut these wires, I'm committed and there's no turning back. I've cut these wires. I'm just going to strip a little bit back using the Klein wire strippers, and then I'm going to join them back together again using the couple of Wago clips. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to cut the blue and the brown wire here, and I'm going to splice in this brown and yellow wire. I don't have a blue wire at the moment, but I'll get one later, and then we're going to see if that solves our roof problem. So we'll be bypassing all of this curved bit of wire. We'll be able to take that out and inspect it. First of all, we're carefully going to cut this cable tie here and just pull this wire out, make it a little bit easier. Next, we're going to cut the wire. We're going to cut it just past that white cable tie mark. Next, using our stitch picker, we're going to strip back a little bit of this insulation. I've tested the continuity from here to here and everything is looking good. The next thing to do is take away our wooden support and see if the roof closes. I've left these wires here purposely loose because we can always cut them shorter later. If everything works as it should, I may well come back and crimp these wires together rather than using these Wago clips. So I'm going to try closing the roof now, hopefully without crushing those two connectors. We'll see how that goes. I'm going to try opening the roof now and at the same time holding our wooden bolster here. Now let's try closing the roof. One more time, try opening the roof. That all seems to work, so the next thing to do is to take out the old section of wire, and we can possibly reuse this sheathing, and then we can examine it for brakes. If you do cut these cable ties, just remember where they go when you put the whole thing back together. And now the moment of truth. We're going to pull these wires through this sheathing, and let's have a look and see if any of them are damaged. Wow, so there you have it. 2 breaks in the casing of the wire, right down at that lower hinge just there. The rest of the wire looks okay, although there are signs of pinching and wear just here at the top section as well. So we will be replacing the entire section of wire there. I think I'll get slightly thicker gauge wire than what we've got here and obviously get the correct colors. But for the time being, I'm going to call that job done. In the event we didn't need to take out any other panels other than this one down here, the next thing we've got in line for this SL55 is an ABC fluid flush. I'm just waiting for the fluid to arrive, and then we'll show you how to do that if you've never done it before.